Right, it's 2 minutes past, so we'll get into it. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Paul Phillips, Managing Director of AAR, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar in which we're going to focus on the in-house agency. Advertising agency leaders could be forgiven for thinking that their services that they provide are continually coming under attack. Decoupling of production, the focus on cost of service rather than the value-add contribution, and more recently, artificial intelligence, the full impact of which has yet to be felt by us all. Throughout all these challenges, the presence of the in-house agency and its evolving role has been a constant. In this webinar, we'll look beyond the headlines to offer some clarity on the role of the in-house agency and what this means for external agencies to remain relevant to the brands with which you work. Leading this exploration is Tabitha Winter, who has huge experience across the comms and marketing landscape. Tabitha is a seasoned creative services and operations expert, building over 25 years of experience spanning all aspects of advertising and marketing. Her primary focus lies in strategically optimizing in-house and agency-side creative departments to align with a brand and company's business objectives. We hope that you find the webinar insightful and useful and encourage you to post questions to glean as much knowledge and perspective from Tabitha as you want, and that this will help in your relationships with the clients that you work with currently who have an in-house agency or are considering it. Tabitha, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Welcome, everyone, and thank you to the AAR for inviting me to do this webinar. Make sure that everything's working. So, understanding in-house agencies, what I believe agency leaders need to know. But first, as Paul mentioned, a little bit about me. I've been in the industry for over 25 years now. I have become known for strategic solution finding and building and optimizing both in-house and agency side creative departments. Through the years, I've become specialized in process creation, training, consulting, mentoring, and implementing MarTech tools. And I've transformed working processes, generated cost savings quite substantially for some really large brands. And hopefully along the way, I've managed to elevate team morale. Recently with the NatWest Group, I was focused on optimizing their in-house creative operations to be able to work with their external agencies better. And before that, I built and led Wave Creative, which was a 300-person agency within the Entain Group. And as mentioned before, I saved them £20 million in cost in creating that in-house agency. And not only that, I pride myself in actually boosting their conversion rates by an average of about 2.5% per year. My current role is running a creative operations consultancy business with a focus on, you guessed it, creative operations, both agency and client side, and particularly within in-housing. So why I believe this webinar is necessary is that I think there has been a lot of conversation about in-housing. I think in-housing is growing and is definitely on the rise. But I also believe that whether you're in-house or external, we're all part of the same creative ecosystem. And I know that I certainly couldn't have done what I did at Entain without my external agency partners. So just quickly, through the rise of in-house agencies, I'd like to take a moment to talk through how they've adjusted over the years and how they've grown. And what may be surprising to some, if you're going to be pedantic about the definition of an in-house agency, is they actually began a long time before they became a hot topic and sort of part of the general conversation. In the decades through the 60s and the 90s, there was a constant shifting of major advertisers to and from what were then known as house agencies rather than in-house agencies. And there were many large brands that set up these house agencies, particularly around the 70s. And from the late 80s into the 2000s, media accounts were increasingly separated from creative accounts, which led to the rise of media agencies in the 90s, some of which shifted in-house. So that became another version of what an in-house agency was. But it was from the mid-2000s onwards that in-house agencies in the form we typically mean today became more prevalent. And it's typical that this was, economic pressure. The 2008 recession had a massive influence on the rise of in-house agencies, and brands became very much more interested in them. And although they were initially pigeonholed into being, production houses in the although they were initially pigeonholed into being production houses within brands, in 2010, they started winning major awards, breaking that stereotype, and in truth, providing the impetus for all in-house agencies to start wanting to be more than just those quick and dirty merchants. An initial report by the ANA in 2008 reported that 42% of brands had in-house agencies, and by 2016, that had grown to 58%. By 2018, the variety of services offered by in-house agencies had grown from being that production-only offering to providing strategic and conceptual creative as well. And in 2019, Spotify's in-house agency won a Cannes Lion, which I believe was the first for an in-house agency. Once again, through the adversity in 2020, this time in the form of the pandemic, when many creatives were finding themselves either redundant or on furlough. And this actually provided the environment for brands to allow people to work remotely, which meant that the talent pool that was available to them was like never before. And, being able to work remotely, previously a massive blocker to talent wanting to work in brands was location. Not every brand is located in the center of Soho in London. And being able to work remotely and also needing to work, I guess, and being available as a far cheaper option than external agencies, brands started sitting up and taking notice. And this is when I started noticing a huge increase in both the number of in-house agencies and the quality of the work coming from them. By 2021, 78% of brands reported that their in-house agencies were more effective than ever. And in 2022, AB InBev's in-house agency won a second Cannes Lion for the industry as Marketer of the Year. This year, MailChimp's Wink Creative in-house agency are Ad Age's in-house agency of the year. The thing about in-house agencies is that many of them were agency people. And they want the same things they wanted when they were external, the awards, the great work, the recognition. And the industry has started noticing. And my guess is they won't be happy with the awards and recognition being segregated by in-house and external agencies for very much longer. Unfortunately, as yet, there are not many reporting bodies in the UK focused on in-house agencies, but there are a few. And there are even fewer, if I'm honest, in the UK. Most of them are in the US. But the In-House Agency Leaders Club, or IHELC, has been around in the UK since 2021 and did the first benchmarking survey for in-house agencies earlier this year. In this, they created 4 categories for in-house agencies to measure themselves against, from production studio through to lead agency, based on the work that they are doing. And this showed that actually only 2% of UK's in-house agencies classify themselves as a production studio. And when asked what their ambitions were over the next 5 years, not only did production studio disappear down to 0%, but the lead agency category grew to almost 50%. And as you can see at the bottom of the screen, many of them are already hiring the types of people and skills that could make that happen for them. And I think that that is down to the fact that post-pandemic and post-lockdown, brands are far more comfortable with either hybrid or fully remote working. And this means that the talent pool and, there's also, if you take into account the fact that brands are offering great compensation packages, they often offer things like bonuses. And, when you work brand side, it sounds awful to say, but typically you're not working weekends and every hour that God gives. So the work-life balance does feature a lot in the talent pool's reasons for working with brands. Back to the US for this data from the ANA, because no one has done it yet in the UK. And it shows that in 2023, 82% of brands reported having an in-house agency. And that is expected to rise by 11%. The next report is out in 2028, and they're expecting an 11% rise in that figure. Of that 82%, 57% of those in-house agencies are less than 5 years old. So the growth is all very recent. And I think that the pandemic actually had a lot to do with that. And whilst cost efficiencies remains the top benefit for having an in-house agency, better knowledge of the brands and creative expertise are featuring the top 10 reasons for having an in-house agency now, whereas before they weren't necessarily up within that top 10. Alongside this, 87% of brands are reporting being satisfied all the way up to completely satisfied with their in-house agencies. So you'll have seen slides like this in so many other presentations, I'm sure, but I've included them here to illustrate the types of brands that are reporting being satisfied and more with their in-house agencies. Some of these are also actually providing services direct to brands now, if you think of Meta, YouTube, and Google. And in the UK, Specsavers in-house agency is recognized as best in class and is actually a setup that many in-house agencies aspire to be. However, it's not all doom and gloom for external agencies. 96% of brand and in-house agencies reported using external agencies as well as their in-house agencies. It's typically just the type of work that is adjusting, where external agencies are offering more of the above-the-line campaign and the branding and design and the creative and strategic platform. In-house agencies are still very much focused on the content side of the scale. Of those 96% who still work with external agencies, 63% of them view externals as their partner. 2% of them do view you as competition, and 35% of them see you as kind of a combination of partner and competitor. But I think this shows that they're open and willing to play nicely and recognize that they can't be all things to all brands, which is where I believe external agencies have an opportunity. What I think is very interesting here is that whilst the marketeers are still making the decision about what work goes where, in-house agencies are starting to influence that decision now. As a final point on in-house agencies, I thought I would talk about the different models that they are reporting. So there's the fully in-house agencies where all scope skills are available in-house. There's the agency implant, something that Oliver Agency has been incredibly good at, where the agency sets up an agency within the client office and then provides overflow at either an offshore office or an office within easy access. Overflow agencies, such as the ones PepsiCo and Google use, where all scope services are in-house, but they have a selected partner for overflow peaks. There's the specialist support, which is what most clients are using, if I'm honest, where the core services are offered in-house, and then there's selected partners or partner to deliver those non-core projects. This is often where overflow and capacity for the in-house team, where the in-house team aren't able to answer a requirement, they will use an external partner to do so. There's the freelance pool, where there's a core internal team, and then they bring in skills and talent from a pool of known freelancers. And then there's a very interesting model, which I actually didn't know about before, which is the producer-driven one, where primarily it's creative ops, producers, project managers, account managers in-house, and then they select appropriate agencies outside of that. So moving on to my observations of both the current and future state of in-house agencies and where I think the opportunities lie for external agencies. I think, the constants are that in-house agencies have always had the advantage of deep brand knowledge and understanding. There's a level of intimacy and alignment with the brand values and objectives that's challenging for external agencies to match. If you consider that in-house agencies are typically on the all-hands call or on the CEO's talk every quarter, or understanding exactly where the brand is going or what the CMO has released as the marketing strategy for the year before the external agencies have. And the proximity to internal stakeholders and those decision makers has consistently allowed those in-house agencies to operate with a level of speed and agility that is challenging for external agencies to match. Where you guys are typically potentially letting down another client, in-house agencies are speaking with the marketeers and adjusting the brand's requirement for the work. So prioritization for them can be a lot easier. There's cost efficiencies, pursuit of cost efficiency and budget control. It's a long-standing advantage. There's no additional costs or agency rate. There's simply the cost of the talent. There's ambition. I don't think any in-house agency can be accused of not being ambitious. They want to excel. They're constantly striving to enhance their capabilities. That could be driven by just competition or seeing good work out there and wanting to produce it. I think it's one of the reasons is because top talent is moving over from the agencies, and they're well known for not wanting to produce bad work or work they perceive to be as bad. In-house agencies have constantly had the advantage of seamless alignment with internal objectives, goals, and cultures. As I mentioned before, they're at all the meetings. They can tap their colleagues on the shoulder. They don't necessarily have to set up specific meetings. They can turn around on their seat and speak to their client, if you like. And proximity to the business allows those in-house agencies to leverage a deep understanding of brand values to create those authentic, resonant content and campaigns. The things I'm seeing that are changing is that over the past 5 years, there's been a significant expansion in the variety of roles and specializations within those in-house agencies. And they're starting to hire creatives and strategists and social specific people, whereas before they were maybe designers and copywriters. They're now hiring conceptual people. In-house agencies have also evolved from being that execution focused to playing a far more strategic and creative role, driving innovation and thought leadership within their organization. They've got the ear of the MD and the CEO and the CMO, and they can introduce new ideas within spaces that perhaps external agencies wouldn't be able to reach. The integration of IA and MarTech tools has become a pivotal change for them. Before, many of the in-house agencies I encountered in the early 2000s, 2010s were still running an entire studio off an Excel spreadsheet, or relying on external agencies for campaign personalization. Whereas now brands are investing in that MarTech, bringing it in-house and hiring the specialists to be able to do that kind of work within the performance space, particularly. There's a growing trend of in-house agencies wanting to collaborate with external agencies. I think it would be fair to say that in the early 2000s, 2010s, in-house agencies definitely viewed external agencies as competition. And there was something I kept hearing everywhere, we can do that. Why does it need to go externally? We can do that. Whereas what I'm noticing now is very much a change in recognition of the specialisms that external agencies can provide and the external perspectives that they can provide. And they're very much moving to a more collaborative approach. Those in-house agencies have been progressively broadening their range of services. They've got strategic planning, media buying, market research. As I mentioned earlier, they're moving into the performance space rather a lot. And there's a noticeable shift of top talent moving in-house, driven by the opportunity to work more closely and consistently with one brand who's doing good work. And as I mentioned before, in-house agencies typically offer a better work-life balance, which I think with the newer generations that are coming through the ranks, that's an incredibly important factor for them. They're no longer, whereas when I started in advertising, it was just expected that you worked 80-hour weeks, or you anticipated that you were going to do that. The newer generations aren't quite so happy to put up with that. And there's a lot of financial benefits of working with brands as well. They're offering perhaps not quite so competitive salaries as with external agencies, but they are offering more time off, sabbaticals, bonuses, all of those kinds of things, which agencies don't typically offer. What I'm noticing that's on the rise is that attitudes are shifting towards an in-house agency. So, like I mentioned before, where marketeers were actually skeptical about their capability to deliver high quality, innovative work, they're starting to notice that actually they can and they do. And this is driven by all the awards that they are winning in the various spaces. You know, things like CanLine used to not be available to an in-house agency because of the lack of specialism and lack of capability. They're moving away from the production only mindset. And marketeers are sitting up and noticing that actually talent is coming in-house, and good talent at that. The perceived value of in-house agencies has been on the rise, with marketing teams acknowledging the benefits of having a team that is deeply aligned. You know, when it comes to briefing, I'm not going to lie, briefs in-house are still just as bad as the ones that you guys receive. But in-house, they understand a little bit more because they are at all those meetings. They know the brand values a little bit more. They have insight into what the CEO said at Thursday's meeting and how that might influence the work, which is hard for you guys to get in front of. There's actually a growing realization that in-house agencies can act as strategic partners, you know, contributing to brand strategy and business objectives, not just producing cool campaigns and all the rest. They're actually influencing business strategy as well now. And in-house agencies are increasingly gaining a seat at the decision-making table. You know, they're having more influence on brand and business strategies. Their deep understanding of the brand and the business is being recognized as a valuable asset in strategic discussions about product development, about what the next campaign might be and how it might attract new customers. You know, they're hungry and ambitious, so they are learning more, and they've got the platform to be able to talk about the things that they are learning and implementing. And they've got more access to data, whereas you guys may gain data from your own internal analysis or from the marketeers themselves. Those in-house agencies have access to business insights team. I know at Entain, one of the things I used to do on a monthly basis was speak with the business insights team and the performance marketing teams to make sure I understood exactly what was going on where and how I might need to instruct the team to adjust. And then, you know, with their unique position within the organization, they're becoming strong advocates for change and innovation. They're starting to drive initiatives that both align with the business landscape and consumer expectations, which I'd be honest, I didn't personally experience that at Entain, but I am noticing it with PepsiCo and Specsavers and places like that. So moving into what I believe are the opportunities for you guys. I don't want you to view this presentation as all doom and gloom and in-house agencies are going to take over the world. I don't believe that that's relevant. I think, you know, they are recognizing, and you bring to the table incredible specialization and expertise. I think potentially the best way to achieve that will be clearly defining roles and alignment, making sure that you don't just speak with the marketing client, that you actually engage the in-house agencies as well. As I mentioned earlier, they are becoming key decision makers. They are influencing the decisions, and they are open to collaboration. What I think we need to recognize, though, is that the individual within the in-house agency used to work external, typically now, the senior ones at that anyway. They know what the conversations used to be, and they remember how people referred to in-house agencies. So I think the early 2000s and 2010s, where they primarily viewed external agencies as competition and wanted to prove their own worth, came from that feeling of being second-class citizens. I think if we can adjust the external agencies' culture internally to where they're viewed as collaborators and not as competition, where they're spoken about as a valuable skill set to add to the campaigns and add to the conceptual creation and that kind of thing, I think you'll start gaining more traction with all of them and being incorporated in more discussions. I think that you need to become those integral partners with the entire marketing ecosystem of the business, including its in-house agency. And I think collaboration with the in-house agency is actually the key to growth of what you can offer each of the brands and what you can bring to the table and what you will be asked for. And I apologize for the cat yowling in the background. Sorry. But yes, I think my point of this entire webinar is in-house agencies are on the rise. They are gaining more influence within brands. They are having a seat at the top table more often than not. But I don't think that they are competition for you guys. I think that they are new and exciting collaboration partners. And I think that fostering relationships with them will only enhance your relationship with your marketeers. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Tabitha. So if people can put their questions in chat, we've got a few, sorry, in the Q&A section. We have a few already. So the future ambition figures indicate 47% of in-house agencies want the agency lead status. Do you think this can be achieved? And from your experience working with brands, do you think this is what CMOs want?
I'm not sure that CMOs want it right now. I think that it may become something that they recognize and start wanting in the future. I think that it can be achieved. I think that the reason it can be achieved is for all the pieces that I stated earlier, where they are hiring talent and they are bringing people on board who are typically ambitious for that kind of status. And they have the ear of the people who can make that decision for them moving forward. I think, however, CMOs will always want the fresh perspective that comes from an agency, will always want the specialisms and talents that live within external agencies. I just think the relationship may shift slightly towards a more collaborative model than what it is right now.
Thank you. So touching on what you just said there, Ed Palmer, St. Luke's, thank you, Ed. Is the lack of variety still a barrier for hiring top creative talent in-house?
In some brands, yes. In some brands, they do tend to concentrate on only one brand doing only one thing, and that can be limiting for some talent. However, I think what is interesting in all the ones I've seen, they may start in one area of the business and move into being able to offer other specialisms and other campaigns and work on something. I mean, I've seen some in-house agencies actually pitching against externals now in an effort to prove that they could be working in a different area. So yes, whilst I think some brands will remain stuck in that area of lack of variety, I think others are recognizing that they can actually move and shift.
Great, thank you. Let's check what else we have. The top benefit of an in-house agency is cost efficiency at 87%, with creative expertise at the bottom with 50%. Given the ambition of in-house agencies, what are the barriers that they face in attracting the right caliber of talent, and how have things changed post-COVID? So you have certainly covered the first part of that question just now, but have you seen a change post-COVID?
Absolutely. Brands, for example, you've got places like PepsiCo, where they recognize that one of the key barriers to hiring great talent was their location. So they've actually created a location in central London where only the creative agency, the in-house creative agency, I think it's called Sips and Bites, they are in central London. The rest of the brand personnel are outside of central London. You've got others who recognize that remote and hybrid working means that talent can be anywhere in the world and that they can create an agency. So at Entain, for example, we had people in 5 different geographic locations around the world, and we had a arm in the US through the Best MGM arm of the business, and we were able to collaborate across the world. And we did most of that remotely. You know, brands aren't moving their people back into bums on seats locations in the offices anymore, particularly in the creative space, because they're recognizing that that was a huge barrier to face to hiring the right caliber of talent. And I think, you know, what we do need to recognize is that top talent, it moves and shifts. It goes backwards and forwards. We might find it shifting back towards the agencies and coming back in-house, but I think that in-house now is more of a conversation for talent than it used to be.
Can I jump in on that point?
Absolutely.
Understandably, a lot of this focuses on the creative talent, the creative in-house talent. And yet anyone who's worked in a creative agency would recognize that it is the strategic insights and foundations that allow and enable great creative work. Are you seeing the same appeal for in-house strategic talent or different ways of working with strategic capability that then informs the creative talent within an agency?
Absolutely. I mean, I know of a lot of brands where the strategists are coming out of agency and actually sitting within the brand team now, not just within the creative studio agency production part, or, you know, whatever they may have as their own in-house setup. Typically strategists, some are moving into the creative arm of brands, but typically they're moving into the marketing arm and sitting alongside the marketeers. But again, they are being treated with this location agnostic behavior. So I think that whole thing of, I don't want to travel up to Doncaster to go and work for a certain brand, or what it's become more remote, more hybrid. I'm seeing agencies, because naturally bringing creatives and strategists and everyone together and seating them in the same place provides an environment for creativity and, you know, breeds those water cooler moments. But they're recognizing that it happened for 3 years during the pandemic and it can still happen. So it's less of a necessity for brands now. Sorry, you're on mute, Paul.
Sorry, I said if you did want to travel up to Doncaster, you wouldn't be doing it on HS2.
That's for sure.
I think there's another question from Graham Cassidy, who says, do we think, like a lot of things in business, this is cyclical, and in a few years' time, we'll see a trend to outsourcing?
I think you're right. Things are always cyclical. I don't know that we'll see a full trend towards outsourcing. And I think if we do outsource in the future, it'll be for slightly different things than we outsourced for before. I think the requirement for outsourcing might change. I think what will become I think in-house versus external will become slightly less of a conversation. I think it'll become agency rather than particularly in-house and external. I know they don't want to, in-house agencies in particular, you know, they don't want to be branded, if you like. They would like the ability to shift across the border. So I think moving forward into the future, yes, we probably will come to slightly more of a equilibrium between the two, but I think that'll be because, once again, they'll just be working for agency rather than working in-house or external. Right. Nick has just asked, how important do I see the role of offshoring for more than just the traditional production roles or skill sets? Nick, in particular, I think brands that have bigger geographies than just the UK, they are starting to hire talent in location. So in Tain, we had brand requirements across every location in Europe, for example. And we recognized that we needed top creative in location in order to be able to answer location-specific requirements. So it wasn't a case of feeding down the main creative strategy from on high in London and then translating it or transcribing it for location. So we were starting to implement creative in more areas, offshoring, if you like, from the UK. I think production will always remain an offshoring option because it's cheaper and easier to brief, and it's nice to have something done overnight whilst you sleep. But I do think that the roles in the different areas will definitely grow. I know web development is one of them, although that could be seen as production.
Right. I think we've got one more, Paul, just come in. I'll just read that out. Thanks, Tabitha. What are the standout reasons why in-house agencies fall short of their CMO's expectations? And are there common challenges that external agencies have in working with in-house agencies?
Yeah. So again, I think CMOs are very conscious of in-house agencies possibly becoming a little stagnant within the space and needing some outside influence. And I think that that's where external agencies are absolutely shining. They also, you know, there's that old phrase of drinking too much of the Kool-Aid, that you know, that can happen with an in-house agency as well. I think as well, sometimes familiarity can breed contempt, and people have long memories. So sometimes in-house agencies really aren't given the leeway to have made mistakes. So they, you know, they made a mistake once, or they let somebody down once, and then there's a squeaky wheel type conversation that goes on all the time. But I think external agencies suffer from that as well. I don't think it's just internals that suffer from that squeaky wheel problem. In terms of external agencies working with in-house agencies, I think it's a similar type of problem. I think there's a fear of in-house agencies eating the external agency's lunch. I think there's a competitive mindset when there doesn't need to be one. And I think there's essentially just this fear thing of, you know, we have to do it because we need the revenue and we need the money, instead of recognizing that actually in working with the in-house agencies, their influence will grow, their remit will grow, and it would be beneficial for them to do so.
Okay, I'm going to jump in at this point, unless anyone furiously types in a final question, to first of all thank Tabitha for sharing her knowledge, her wisdom, her insight, her perspective on this subject. I think it's going to be around for some time, and hopefully what Tabitha has shared will help inform you in your discussions with your clients that either currently have an in-house agency resource or are thinking about it. Thank you also for taking the time to join this webinar. We're going to post it on AAR's website, so you'll be able to revisit it for some of the stats that were shared, or indeed point colleagues in the direction of the webinar, should it be of interest and relevance to them. So with that, thank you again, and we will see you all soon.
Thanks very much, Paul.